What's up, YouTube? This is Boy Daddy back. I had a little thing I wanted to read to you. I named this The American Dream. How can I feel the same? Can I ever understand the betrayal of my own country perpetrated by our own government? After a life of wanting to believe in the American dream, I tried hard to be proud to be an American. I can only lower my head in shame for the foolish mindset and my foolish hope in the goodness of man, especially the men who run this country and the world. I've reached a place in my life at 41 where I've watched the decline of America and the elimination of the white middle class, the outsourcing of the farmers, the industrials, the manufacturers, and most other domestic products that the United States at one time led the world in. Now we import everything used in this country, all the way down to our food. We're totally dependent on imports from foreign countries to sustain our livelihood. When I was young, the U.S. was a superpower leading the world, setting an example of pride, patriotism, and democracy. Now we are an example of a corruption, of greed, and betrayal. I now know the government has been covering up and lying about their actions and their intentions since the 50s or longer. All the presidents, before and after, have been placed in office for the world elite's agenda. The Jewish bankers and the world Illuminati have manipulated the U.S. government and its citizens since at least the First World War, and have caused every major economic and social disaster since World War I or before. They have planned to control the U.S. from the start and have succeeded in this plan. They have systematically eliminated the U.S. from world dominance. They have turned us into a fledgling shell of our former self. The American people have been a pawn used by the politicians and the Jewish media to vote in year after year the puppets that continue their agenda. They have distracted the people with TV shows and with bullshit dramas, TV news channels that spoon-feed the people this crap. They pit the people against each other. Whites against blacks, blacks against Latinos, Republicans against Democrats, and so on and so forth, with the masses wrapped up in the confrontations and along with other normal problems of life, like paying mortgages, power bills. They raise kids. They try to enjoy some small fraction of their own life. They have been blinded to what the government's actions have been. They are oblivious to the facts that their own politicians have forgotten their elected oath to serve the people, and they have served their own interests along with the world elite, and they care little what the people want or what the people expect from them. They think that they are above any responsibility for their actions. They have assassinated presidents, they have murdered citizens, they plotted terror attacks, performed sadistic experiments on Americans, all the while covering up the truth and portraying themselves as one of the good guys. They filled our history books with their lies, manipulating our school system so America's young will fall into line with these lies, and so that they will believe that their government is on their side and that they are just. The CIAs have smuggled drugs into the U.S. They've infiltrated foreign governments, protected murderers, murdered U.S. citizens, and plotted and covered up the murder of JFK. Now the government has plotted and carried out the greatest act of treason in the history of mankind. After 9/11, the attack against the American people, they have topped all tyrants through history. It hurts me to learn of the many atrocities our leaders have committed, and to see how far from the World War II generation we have come. After I have learned how the World War II generation have made the greatest sacrifice of any in history. They gave up their life to volunteer to fight in Europe. The housewives and the mothers went to work, and they built ships and guns, and they still raised their kids and kept the home up while the men were at war. Then they won the war to come home. They still made a great impact on domestic history, now only to be disgraced by a nation of ungrateful, greedy power-mongers. And then now they must pass on, and they leave the torch to the next generation, who has done nothing but disrespected everything they had fought for and died for. And then for our leaders to do nothing but lie to the people. Since then we sent soldiers to fight in Korea and Vietnam. The wars were for profit and their own personal gain. They watched as our young men and women rebel against every aspect of honor and respect. The politicians desecrated every value they stood for. They covered up the truth, and they plotted to fight these wars for profit, to perform experiments of biological warfare on Americans. to stage attacks on American cities and have the gall to stand tall and profess our greatness. It is a slap in the face to anyone who has died for this country, in any war or domestic terror attack. It is a shame what our country has become. When I read my first book about the New World Order, it was in 1993, and I have had no doubt that this plan exists and that the threat from these elitists is real. Then as I started to pay attention to the political players in our government, I realized just how deep this corruption runs. With every new administration, the laws passed take more and more of our rights. They take the rights from the state and the people. The Constitution and the Bill of Rights have been dissected little by little until soon they are worthless papers in which no one believes, and which no one stands up to defend. It's funny how this game is played. The tyrants have played false flag operations against the masses at least. Who knows how many times since World War I. They create fear from economic, national security, banking, and global terrorists. So more and more Americans live in fear, and then they will give up more and more of their liberties to feel safe. After World War II, when the Cold War began, the enemy was communism and the Soviet Union. At some point, our CIA and high-ranking Pentagon brass decided that no holds would be barred, so we began to do dirty behind-the-curtain deals. We brought German war criminals to the U.S. to help spy on Russia. We gave them immunity from the War Crimes Tribunal. So I guess our moral high horse, as the global do-good, it can be compromised when it's convenient. When it serves our interests, we forget our moral character. The bullshit that we portray to the world. And then behind the scenes we manipulate and control these war criminals for our own gain. We seized German scientists and brought them to help the U.S. with the Manhattan Project for the race to build an atomic bomb. They also helped put NASA on the moon in the race to space. We used the research from Nazi experiments to further modern medicine and took credit for the good things, all the while condemning the Germans and executing them at Nuremberg. We funded German spies who played both sides while taking our tax dollars for their own gain. We had many American companies that supported the Nazi war effort, from Standard Oil to IG Farben. Our future president's father made millions from the war. He gave the Bush family their first fortune. The Saudi family of bin Laden gave them their next fortune. And while all this was in motion, our leaders professed to the people that our endeavor was just and that we had a moral obligation to enter the war to fight Nazism. But they never seemed to mention that we were allies of the communist Russia. We helped them to recover and defeat Germany so that they could take half of the German land and imprison the German people. They raped and pillaged, they stole wealth, and extended their communist rule across Europe. Funny how I thought Russia and communism was our greatest threat. If you think Hitler was a bad guy, you should check out Stalin and the atrocities that he committed, while he ruled Russia with an iron fist, murdering millions of innocent people in his wake. But I did not notice these facts in my textbooks, nor did any teacher ever teach the truth of our part in World War II. Even most Americans did not know, and were naive to think our countrymen could be capable of such a double standard. It's all bullshit. Not only did we play all sides, but we have continued to do so in every aspect of foreign policy since, and we still play both sides today. We allowed the German land to be split down the middle, separating families, and blocked food and medical aid to the country after the war, effectively starving millions of innocent Germans, and watched across the fence while millions of Germans were murdered, raped, and tortured by our allies, the Soviet Union. There's no wonder the Germans hate us with a passion. Can you blame them? While these travesties were going on, we broadcast to the world how we had saved the Germans, and we would continue to support them with troops and bases to help them rebuild. Ah, what a joke. The U.S. needed to keep an eye on the communists since the Cold War was in full motion. So we again played the good guy when in reality we were no better than the Nazi regime. At least they made no attempt to hide their agenda of world domination. Either didn't like the terror to date, after all the propaganda and taking what little rights we had left, to go all over the globe to American people waking up. The many who are in touch with the plan will not be taken prisoner,